I've reviewed several gimbals this year. The $249 Zhiyun Weebill 3E, that's aimed at first-time buyers, giving them an affordable option. Then there's the Crane 4, a high-end gimbal aimed at hobbyists and professionals. But what about the slightly older Weebill 3S? Does this make more sense for you? While there are many gimbals on the market, from DJI to Zhiyun, they all deliver the same basic modes regardless of price. Pan follow mode is suited for doing vehicle shots on foot, on a bike, or while in another vehicle. It's also great for doing those hero shots, and it's my default mode about 80% of the time. Follow mode, it provides more control, allowing you to tilt up and down, while lock mode is great for keeping the camera locked ahead, never veering off. POV mode is kind of like follow mode, but it responds a whole lot quicker. Vortex mode is fun, and just like it sounds, it's one of those creative modes that can be a lot of fun to play with. So what's the main difference between the $749 Crane 4 and the more affordable Weebill 3S or the Weebill 3E? Well, heft for one. The Crane 4 can carry really heavy loads up to 14 pounds, and if you're shooting with lenses like the 24-105, you can zoom all the way in from 24 to 105 without needing to rebalance or recalibrate. And the motors, well, they can also stand up to those jarring movements, even with heavy gear, without going into axis lock. So if you're an experienced videographer and you don't want to waste time recalibrating and rebalancing the gimbal, if you want to be able to put zoom lenses on with heavy gear and go from 24 to 105 or even 24 to 80 or 70, then I highly recommend the Crane 4. So what's the main difference then between the Weebill 3S and the recently announced Weebill 3E? Well, as you can see here, the 3E is painted beige, while the 3S, it's painted black. And weight-wise, they're almost the identical weight, with the 3S being a hefty 4.8 grams heavier. Now in terms of payload, and this is what these are able to actually balance and calibrate, and that includes the camera, the lens, and anything else you put onto the stand. Well, they're both able to carry a payload of 6.6 pounds. It's considerably less than the Crane 4, but for most people, even with the Canon EOS R5 and the 50mm f1.2, it does come in just under 4 pounds, so not a problem there. And they both have that second generation grip, joystick and control surfaces, and both support the sling attachment with the wrist guard. In terms of charging time, both gimbals take 2 hours to charge, the 3S and the 3E. But when it comes to runtime, well, this is where you might think things are a little bit backwards. The 3E, the more affordable unit, can go for 16 hours, whereas the 3S, the more expensive unit, can only go for 11.6 hours. And that's definitely a noticeable difference. However, I was recently in Vancouver and I spent an entire day from around 7 o'clock in the morning till about, well, I'd say about 5 o'clock in the evening shooting, and the gimbal wasn't on the whole time. When I was going between scenes or locations, I had the thing powered off. And when I got to the end of the day, I was only down to about half of the charge. These things do last a long time, and if you do need to charge it up or even to top it up, it's going to take you at most 2 hours, and even if you put it on for about 30 minutes to an hour, it's going to charge it up enough that you're ready to go for the rest of the day. And I know what you're thinking. Based on what I've told you already, the cheaper, the more affordable 3E seems to be, well, a better gimbal than the 3S, and this can't be the case, could it? And you're right, it isn't. Unlike the 3E, the 3S supports the optional image transmitter and focus motor. So when it comes to Zhiyun, choosing a gimbal is rather simple. If you need something that can handle a heavy payload without having to recalibrate or rebalance every time you change your focal length, well then go with the Crane 4, and those motors, they're really heavy duty. However, if you want something more affordable and you don't need a whole bunch of attachments, then obviously the 3E is the way to go. But if you want to be able to attach things such as, well, a transmitter or a focus motor, and you still want something lightweight, then go with the 3S. But a lot of people ask me, well, Simon, what do you shoot with? What type of gimbal do you use? Well, when I'm traveling and a plane's involved, I usually pack the 3S, as I did here for Vancouver. It's small and it easily packs into a suitcase or even a carry-on. However, while traveling by car or working locally, I always opt for the Crane 4. But let me give you a real-life fail. This fail shot is a result of going from 24 to 105 and not recalibrating or rebalancing. But the Crane 4, when I was testing it with a 24 to 105, didn't have the same issue. Those focus motors are really heavy duty, and they can easily handle going from 24, if that's where it was balanced at, all the way up to 105. And usually in those situations, I actually balanced it around 50 millimeters, which is where I shot most often, so I wasn't throwing it too far off balance. However, while you don't need to rebalance or recalibrate after changing the focal length, one thing I need to caution you on: you are going to reduce the life of the motors as well as the runtime. But do we really need a gimbal? Does having a Weebill 3E, 3S, or even a Crane 4 improve your life, help you get better shots, more cinematic shots? Or is the image stabilization in your camera and combined with the lens more than enough for most shots? These shots, they were all captured without a gimbal, without a tripod, handheld on a full-frame camera. They were captured with a Canon RF 100 to 500 millimeter, giving me more depth, while these shots were captured using the Canon RF 24 to 105, giving me more breadth. However, there are moments where image stabilization just won't work. Due to the R5's interest in focusing on the window rather than the scene below, the footage is amazingly stable, despite the conditions I was working with on the plane. The difference between an experienced videographer and a novice is experience. You see, somebody who's experienced, they kind of know when to use a tool and when not to. They know when to use automatic settings or when to use manual settings. If you're a novice, try shooting an entire event using the camera alone. Learn how to balance and get smooth cinematic shots without a gimbal, and pay very careful attention to where image stabilization in the camera and lens just isn't sufficient. Then shoot an entire event using the gimbal. And I recommend doing this several times. Now, probably not the best to test this out if it's on a paid gig, but if it's a beautiful sunny day or even a beautiful rainy day, because if one thing I learned in Vancouver, if you have consistent weather conditions, you can really spend time to create and tell a story, as you can see right here. I mean, the weather's atrocious. It's raining the entire time. We've got a low cloud ceiling, and the clouds are thick. They're gray, they're dark, but they're beautiful, and it results in a very beautiful scene. And what I'm trying to get at here is you just need to get out there as a novice, and you need to experience. Try holding your camera, have image stabilization attached with a lens with image stabilization. Act like a tripod, hold it, try panning, try tilting. Try just letting the subject do all the movement and the camera staying steady. Then try moving the camera, try walking heel to toe. Learn where the camera and the lens, their image stabilization, how it fails and where it doesn't work. And then try the same thing with the gimbal. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to be quite surprised. You'll be amazed at how good the camera and lens are alone at stabilizing or providing stabilized footage. And then once you've gotten as much as you can out of that, you'll realize how a gimbal is an essential cinematic filmmaking tool, and where you can use one and the other. And when you're developing your shot list, remind yourself, use a gimbal here, what gimbal to use and what modes to use, because you can tell a very, very effective story with the right tools. And that's the real difference between what people call a pro, or as I like to say, an experienced videographer or photographer. It's knowing when to use the tools, how to use the tools, and how to have them set up and configured. And I want to say thank you very much to you for watching to the very end of this review. It's very much appreciated. And I've got other videos that you might want to pay attention to. If you're more interested in the Crane 4, then go ahead and watch this video here. Or if you'd like to know a little bit more about the Weebill 3E, then watch this video here. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. We'll see you again soon.